The CEO's blind date canceled, so he sat alone, until a single mom asked for the spare seat. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us go back to our main character. The hum of quiet conversations filled the restaurant, blending with the soft clink of silverware and the low notes of a jazz piano. Every table gleamed under golden light, and the air smelled faintly of truffle and wine. It was the kind of place where no one ever rushed except for Alexander Carter, who glanced at his watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes. He looked every bit the successful man 32. Sharp suit, calm expression. But the truth behind that calm was irritation. His assistant had booked this blind date as a favor to a client's daughter. It was supposed to be good optics, another polite business connection wrapped in fake laughter and predictable questions. He was ready to endure it until his phone buzzed. Sorry, something came up. Let's reschedule. Alexander stared at the message, jaw tightening. A canceled date was not the problem. What bothered him was how easily people disappeared the moment he stopped being the CEO. For once, he wanted someone to look at him and not see dollar signs. He set his phone down and exhaled slowly. Around him, couples leaned closer, whispering, sharing dessert. The spare seat across from him seemed to mock his solitude. A waiter approached with a polite smile. "Would you like to cancel your reservation, sir?" Alexander hesitated, then shook his head. "No, bring me a coffee, black." The waiter nodded and walked away, leaving him in the glow of soft music and empty company. That was when it happened. A soft voice interrupted the silence. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" He looked up. A woman stood by his table, slightly out of breath, her hair damp from the drizzle outside. She was not dressed for a restaurant like this: gray sweater, worn jeans, and grocery bags in both hands. A single tulip peeked out from one of them, its red petals trembling. Alexander blinked. "No, it is not. Please go ahead." "Thank you," she murmured, sliding into the chair. "They said the restaurant was full, and my kid's school called something about a project I need to pick up before 5. I just needed to sit down for a second before I run back out." The honesty of her ramble caught him off guard. No pretension, no polished small talk. Just a woman clearly exhausted by the day. He smiled faintly. "Rough afternoon?" She gave a dry laugh. "You could say that. The universe loves testing single moms, I guess." He tilted his head. "Single mom?" "Yeah," she said, reaching for a napkin to wipe her hands. "Not exactly a resume highlight on a blind date, huh?" There it was, the first flicker of something unusual. A stranger sitting at a millionaire's table, joking about a blind date that was never hers. The waiter returned, placing a single coffee cup before Alexander, then glanced at her empty spot. Without asking, he poured a second cup. Alexander watched her stir in sugar, her movements careful, almost hesitant. The red tulip on the table leaned slightly toward her as if drawn by her presence. "Funny," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the window. "You look like someone who has never been stood up." He chuckled, lowering his gaze. "You would be surprised." Quote, for a moment, silence lingered between them, comfortable, fragile, and strange. Outside, the city lights flickered through the rain. Then she checked her watch, eyes widening. "Oh no, shoot, I am late again." She stood, grabbing her bags. "Sorry for crashing your dinner." He opened his mouth to speak, but she was already halfway to the door. The waiter approached, confused. "Sir, should I clear the second cup?" Alexander looked at the empty chair, the steam still rising from the untouched coffee, and said quietly, "No, leave it." The camera would have caught that moment perfectly. The wealthy man alone again, but not untouched. Because something about that stranger, her rush, her tulip, her laugh, had left a mark. And somewhere deep down, he knew this was not the last time he would see her. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the thought of that woman lingered like a melody Alexander could not shake. The red tulip on the table had stayed in his mind all night, its fragile color reminding him of something he had not felt in years' simple warmth. He tried to brush it off, convincing himself it was nothing, just a passing encounter. Yet, when he looked at the untouched coffee cup still on his desk, he knew he was lying to himself. For someone like Alexander Carter, life was a schedule carved into glass. Every minute, every decision, every word had a purpose. But lately, everything felt hollow. The endless meetings, the strategic smiles, The world that bowed to him for his signature, it all tasted like lukewarm coffee. His assistant, Thomas, entered his office holding a stack of files. "Sir, the Carter Foundation Board wants to review the art sponsorship proposal. They need your approval today." "Come." Alexander nodded absently, eyes still on the skyline. "Schedule it for tomorrow morning." Thomas hesitated. "Sir, that means delaying the charity exhibit opening. The artist depends on the funding." "I said tomorrow," Alexander repeated softly but firmly. Thomas bowed slightly and left. Alexander turned the tulip between his fingers, realizing he had rescued it from the restaurant before leaving. Its stem was bent, its color fading. Still, it was real. Later that afternoon, he left the office early for the first time in months. He did not know why. Maybe he wanted air. Maybe he wanted to walk without being recognized. The small café near Lexington Avenue smelled like cinnamon and old books. It was quiet, a refuge for writers and students. He ordered black coffee again and sat by the window. The first sip was bitter, grounding him in the moment. Then he saw her. Mia. She was behind the counter this time, her hair tied up messily, wearing a simple apron, handing drinks to customers with a tired smile. There were faint dark circles under her eyes, and yet she glowed in a way he could not explain. He froze for a second. What were the chances? A city of millions, and here she was. When she finally noticed him, her eyes widened. "You," she said softly, as if unsure he was real. "Me," he replied, unable to hide his surprise. "I see you found another full house." She laughed, shaking her head. "No one's fighting for this one. I just work here." There was a pause. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Did I forget to pay for the seat yesterday?" He smiled faintly. "No. In fact, I think I owe you one." Mia looked confused, then amused. "You are not from around here, are you? You have that polished calm people get from boardrooms and private drivers." Alexander chuckled, caught off guard. "And you have that honesty people lose when they start pretending." Her expression softened. "That is flattering, but honesty does not pay the rent." Something in the way she said it cut through his usual armor. There was no self-pity, just quiet resilience. He watched as she served another customer, a college student, counting change, embarrassed. Mia smiled and slid the coffee toward her anyway. "It is on the house today." Alexander felt something stir again. It was not attraction, it was admiration. He remembered what his foundation was supposed to be for. People like her, the ones who kept giving even when they had nothing left to spare. When the line thinned, he asked, "When do you finish your shift?" 4, she answered carefully. "Why?" He hesitated. "There is an exhibit opening this weekend. It is about art changing communities. You might like it." Her eyes brightened just a little. "You like art?" "I am learning," he said with a half smile. Mia studied him, unsure whether to believe him or not. "Well, if I can get someone to pick up my kid, maybe I will go." He nodded, trying to sound casual. "I hope you do." As he left, he glanced back once. She was wiping the counter, humming softly, completely unaware that she had already changed something in him. Outside, the city buzzed as usual. But for Alexander, it all sounded different, clearer, lighter. The kind of quiet that happens right before a story begins again. The weekend came faster than Alexander expected. For the first time in years, he felt a nervous anticipation that had nothing to do with business or negotiations. He stood by the grand entrance of the downtown gallery, surrounded by soft jazz and the sound of champagne glasses touching. His suit was crisp, his tie still missing. He had stopped wearing them lately, as if letting himself breathe for once. Every minute that passed, he looked toward the door. He told himself he was not waiting for her, but his heart betrayed him. The same red tulip from that rainy night now rested in his breast pocket, a quiet reminder of the reason he had come. Mia was late. Outside, the wind tugged gently at her hair as she walked up the marble steps of the gallery. She was wearing a simple navy dress, the kind that moved softly with every step. For a moment, she hesitated by the glass doors, clutching the invitation card Alexander had given her. She had told herself it was just an art event, nothing more. But something in her chest, something she had buried under long nights and double shifts, told her it might be more than that. Inside, the lights dimmed slightly as a spotlight highlighted the main installation, a collection of paintings by local artists, sponsored by the Carter Foundation. The theme read, "Art for Change." Quote. Alexander turned, and there she was, Mia standing uncertainly near the entrance, holding her purse tightly. Their eyes met. The noise of the crowd seemed to fade, replaced by the quiet hum of recognition. He approached, slow but steady. "You made it," he said softly. She smiled, her voice half shy, half teasing. You sound surprised. I was starting to think you would not come. Well, she said, glancing around. It has been a long week, but my son's teacher offered to watch him tonight, so here I am. Then I owe your son's teacher a thank you, he replied with a gentle grin. They walked through the exhibit together, pausing in front of a painting that showed a woman holding a child under an umbrella in the rain. The brush strokes were raw and emotional. Mia tilted her head. This one feels real, she murmured. You can tell the artist has lived through something. Alexander nodded. Pain makes art honest. Quote. She looked at him then, catching something unguarded in his eyes. So, which one is yours? She asked, half joking. He chuckled. Mine would probably just be a blank canvas, too many words, not enough meaning. Her laughter was soft, genuine. For a moment, she forgot the difference between them. He was just a man beside her, not a CEO, not a headline. As the evening went on, they stopped at a smaller exhibit tucked in the corner. On the wall was a collection of sketches, simple pencil drawings by new artists the foundation had sponsored. Alexander gestured toward one in particular, a rough, tender drawing of a child hugging his mother. That one, he said quietly, was part of a community art program we started. A single mom drew it. Mia blinked, then turned to him slowly. You already knew. I did not know it was you, he said, his voice sincere. But when I saw it the first time, it reminded me of you. The way you care, the way you give. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her throat tightened, but her smile held. Maybe life has a strange way of circling back. Maybe it does, he agreed, watching her carefully. They stood in silence, the distance between them smaller than it had ever been. The music swelled, soft and hopeful. Mia looked at the drawing again. You know, she said quietly, when I first drew that, I was at a soup kitchen with my son. I thought no one would ever see it. Quote. He looked down at her. Now thousands will. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen not as a statistic, not as someone to be helped, but as herself. And for Alexander, the moment was just as revealing. He realized the woman who had given him nothing but kindness that night at the restaurant had given him something even greater now, a reason to feel again. Outside the gallery, the rain began to fall lightly, tapping against the glass like a gentle reminder of how their story had begun. He turned to her and said quietly, I kept the tulip. She looked up, eyes wide. You kept it? It reminded me that sometimes the smallest things last the longest. Her lips curved into a slow smile. Maybe you should keep this evening too. He nodded. I plan to, coding. And as they stepped closer to the window, the world outside blurred, just as it had that first night, but this time, they were not strangers anymore. The next morning, the rain still lingered over the city, washing away the dust of the weekend. Alexander woke earlier than usual. He stood by the window of his penthouse, coffee in hand, watching droplets race down the glass. The skyline felt different now, less like a battlefield, more like a place where something gentle could exist. He had not stopped thinking about Mia since the night at the gallery. The way she looked at the painting, the way she smiled when he showed her the tulip, it had stayed with him, echoing in the quiet moments between business calls and board meetings. For the first time in a long time, Alexander felt the pull of something real, something that was not written into a contract or measured in profit margins. Later that day, his assistant Thomas knocked lightly and stepped in. Sir, the board wants your signature on the community funding proposal. They are still skeptical about increasing the charity division. Alexander set his cup down. Tell them I am not cutting the budget. In fact, I want it doubled. Thomas blinked, stunned. Doubled, sir? Yes, Alexander replied, calm but resolute. And make sure the first program supports single-parent families, people who work hard but never get seen. Thomas hesitated, then nodded, realizing this was not a discussion. As the door closed, Alexander allowed himself a small smile. Change, he thought, does not always start with headlines. Sometimes it starts with one person who reminds you what kindness looks like. Meanwhile, Mia was walking home from her morning shift at the café. Her hair was damp from the drizzle, and her hands clutched a paper bag with her son's favorite muffins. Life had not changed overnight, but something inside her had. When she passed a storefront displaying a poster from the Art for Change exhibit, she paused. At the corner of the image, small but visible, was her sketch, the one Alexander had shown her. Her son tugged on her sleeve. Mom, that's yours, isn't it? She smiled, eyes soft. Yes, baby, I guess it is. Does that mean you're famous now? She laughed quietly. Not famous, just seen. That evening, as twilight settled over the city, Mia heard a knock on her apartment door. She hesitated, wiping her hands on her apron before opening it. Alexander stood there, holding an umbrella and a small paper box. He looked almost uncertain, a rare expression for a man who owned half the skyline. "I hope I am not intruding," he said. She blinked in surprise. "What are you doing here?" He held up the box. "I brought something. It is from the exhibit. The artist donated it to the foundation, but I thought it belonged to you." Quote. Inside was a framed print of her sketch, the child hugging his mother, restored and signed with her name. Mia stared at it, speechless. "You did not have to do this." "I wanted to," he said softly. "You reminded me why I started the foundation in the first place." She looked at him, searching for words. "You are not like I expected." "Neither are you," he replied with a gentle smile. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance. He looked up toward the hallway window. "You should get some curtains there. The light leaks through at night." She laughed. "You sound like someone who has been watching." "Not watching," he said, shaking his head. "Just noticing." There was a quiet pause before she asked, "So, what happens now?" He exhaled slowly, choosing his words. "Whatever you need to happen, but I would like to see you again. Not as a sponsor, not as a CEO, just as someone who wants to know what makes you smile when it rains." Quote. She stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of the offer. Then she nodded. "Maybe next time, you bring the coffee. I will bring the muffins." He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. "Deal." When he left, she placed the framed sketch on her table and looked out at the city lights. The rain had eased into a fine mist, almost like the world was holding its breath. In another part of town, Alexander stood beneath the awning, watching the same sky. For once, his reflection in the glass did not look lonely. It looked like a man who had finally remembered what it meant to care. The tulip lay on his desk again, now dried and fragile but somehow more beautiful than before. And beneath the rain, a quiet promise had begun to take root. The following week, the rain finally stopped. The city smelled clean, almost new. Mia walked down the familiar street to the café, her steps light, her thoughts quieter than usual. Something inside her had shifted, like the world had softened its edges. When she arrived, her coworker Jenna was already behind the counter, grinning. "You are trending, you know that?" Mia blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Jenna held up her phone. On the screen was a photo from the Art for Change exhibit, Mia's sketch of the mother and child, now framed under her name. The caption read, "From waitress to artist, the story behind the drawing that moved a CEO." Quote. Mia's stomach dropped. "Wait, what? Who posted that?" "Looks like one of the foundation's partners. It is everywhere now. People are talking about how your work inspired the Carter Foundation's new initiative." Jenna leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You are like the face of the campaign." Mia froze. She had never wanted attention. Yet part of her felt an unfamiliar warmth, validation maybe. Still, she could not help wondering, did Alexander do this? That question followed her the entire day. Later that afternoon, the cafe bell chimed. She looked up and there he was. Alexander Carter, dressed down in a simple dark coat and jeans, looking nothing like the man from the business magazines. He carried 2 cups of coffee. "I owed you this," he said, sliding 1 cup toward her. Mia arched an eyebrow. "You brought the coffee. Guess I will have to find the muffins." He smiled faintly. "I will hold you to that." The cafe was quiet, the afternoon light painting gold across the tables. He sat across from her, and for a moment, it felt strangely normal, like 2 people who had done this 1,000 times before. She broke the silence first. "So, that article, was it you?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Partly. Someone from the foundation team posted it, but I approved it." "Why?" she asked, not angry, just curious. He met her eyes steadily. "Because people like you deserve to be seen. The world celebrates noise, but it forgets quiet strength. You reminded me that change starts small, and that kindness can move mountains." She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "You know, I was scared when I saw it. I thought people would say I did not belong there." He leaned forward slightly. "You belong anywhere your heart leads you. Do not ever doubt that." For a long moment she said nothing. The rain had stopped, but outside, puddles still caught the sunlight like little mirrors. She finally smiled, soft and real. "You sound like someone who is trying to believe that too." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe I am." There was a pause, gentle and unforced. Then she asked, "So, what happens next? Do we go back to our worlds?" Alexander shook his head slowly. "Maybe our worlds were never that far apart. I used to think life was about control. Now I think it is about connection. Cray. She tilted her head, studying him. You really changed, did you know that? I had a good teacher, he said simply. She laughed, the sound light but full. As the day faded, the cafe began to empty. He stood, adjusting his coat. Can I walk you home? Only if you let me buy you another muffin, she teased. Deal, he said, echoing her word from before. They stepped outside together. The air smelled of rain and sunlight, the kind of scent that only comes after a storm. Halfway down the street, Mia stopped. You never told me why the tulip? Alexander glanced at her, surprised by the question. Then he smiled. Because it does not bloom for long, but when it does, it reminds you how beautiful temporary things can be. She nodded slowly, eyes soft. Then maybe we are both tulips. Maybe, he said quietly. They walked on, side by side, their reflections stretching in the puddles. Behind them, through the cafe window, 2 empty cups sat on the table, catching the last light of the setting sun, symbols of something that began by chance but was now rooted in choice. And for the first time in a long while, both of them felt that maybe, just maybe, the world had gotten a little kinder. A month later, the city looked different. The gray of winter had given way to early spring, and with it, a quiet sense of renewal. Flowers bloomed along the sidewalks, and for the first time in years, Alexander found himself walking without a destination. He passed the cafe where everything had started. Through the window, he saw Mia laughing with a customer, her apron dusted with flour, her hair tied up. The scene felt simple, human, and grounding, something he never knew he needed. He did not go inside. Not yet. Instead, he waited outside, leaning against a lamppost, letting the late afternoon drizzle touch his coat. The sky was turning the same soft silver it had been the night they met. His phone buzzed. Thomas, his assistant, had sent another reminder. Press interview at 6. Donors confirmed. Please don't be late. Alexander typed a short reply. Running late. Something more important came up. When Mia finally stepped outside to take a break, she almost did not notice him. But then she stopped, smiling as if she had known he would be there. You are terrible at pretending to just walk by, she said, teasing lightly. He chuckled, caught again. She joined him by the railing, both looking out at the small street below. You know, every time it rains, I think about that night, she said softly. The canceled date. The empty table. He turned slightly toward her. Best canceled plan of my life. She laughed, shaking her head. You always say things like that, do you mean it? His expression grew more serious. I do. You reminded me of something I forgot, that life is not supposed to be a transaction. For a moment they just stood there. The sound of the city felt far away, replaced by the rhythm of rain tapping on the awning. Then Mia spoke again. Do you miss it? Miss what? The noise. The spotlight. The version of yourself everyone wanted you to be. He looked out at the blurred traffic lights, their colors dancing across the puddles. Sometimes, he admitted, but every time I walk into another meeting room, it feels emptier. Like all the applause in the world could not fill the silence that follows. Mia nodded, understanding. Maybe that is what happens when you finally start listening to the quiet. He smiled faintly. You make it sound easy. It isn't, she said. But it is worth it. A few drops of rain landed on her cheek, and she brushed them away. He hesitated for a second before holding out his umbrella. Here, he said, his tone gentle. It is becoming a habit, isn't it? You, me, and the rain. She accepted it, her fingers brushing his. Some habits are worth keeping. They began walking, side by side, as the drizzle turned into a soft rain. The city around them shimmered reflections of neon lights, umbrellas blooming like flowers. As they turned the corner, a group of children ran past, laughing, jumping into puddles without a care. Mia watched them and smiled. You ever wish you could be that free again? Alexander looked at her, then at the tulip in her hand, the one he had given her days earlier. Maybe we are, he said, just in a different way. They stopped under a streetlight, golden against the mist. Mia looked up at him, the rain catching in her lashes. So what now, Alexander Carter? Are you going back to your world? He took a slow breath. No, I think I am finally leaving it behind. She studied him for a moment, searching his face. And where will you go? He smiled softly. Wherever the rain takes me. Hopefully, that means beside you. She said nothing, just smiled, small and real, before stepping closer. For once, there was no dramatic music, no storm to hide behind, just 2 people, standing in the rain, choosing each other quietly. When the traffic light changed, They crossed the street together, not rushing, not hesitating, their reflections stretching across the wet pavement like twin paths converging into one. And somewhere between the drizzle and the glow of the city, their story born from a mistake finally began to feel like destiny. The conference hall was still glowing from the soft amber lights of the gala, but the moment Mia walked out, the warmth felt like it vanished with her. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she moved through the long hallway, head down, eyes glistening. Alexander caught up from behind, his voice low, breath uneven. "Mia, please listen to me." She did not stop. "I have listened, Alexander. Every time I have listened. But this was different." He stepped in front of her, blocking the exit, his eyes pleading. "I did not lie to you. I just did not want the world between us to exist. Not tonight. I wanted to be a normal man beside you." Her jaw tightened. "A normal man does not have 2 bodyguards waiting outside the door," she said, voice trembling. "A normal man does not have journalists pretending to be waiters." He exhaled sharply, pain flickering behind his eyes. "I was trying to protect you. Everything about my life gets twisted and watched. I did not want them to drag you into that." She took a step back. The sound of the rain outside echoed faintly through the glass walls. "You do not get to decide what I can handle. You do not get to control the truth just because it makes things easier." Alexander's hand dropped to his side. "It was not about control, Mia. It was about keeping something real, for once." Her voice cracked. "You say that like you even know what real is." He winced. For the first time, he looked smaller, not the powerful CEO who owned the room, but a man realizing he was losing something he could not buy back. Mia turned away, her reflection ghosted on the glass wall beside them, a woman in pain, caught between love and disappointment. "You do not understand my world, Alexander," she said quietly. "You never had to count every dollar, to choose between art supplies and rent, to build a life from nothing. You live in a world where even honesty has a price tag." He reached out instinctively, but stopped before touching her. His voice dropped to a whisper. "And you live in a world where love gets tested before it is even allowed to start." Her eyes glistened under the dim hallway light. Maybe that is why it never stood a chance. She brushed past him, the faint scent of her perfume mixing with rain and regret. He did not follow this time. He just stood there, watching as she disappeared into the revolving glass doors at the end of the hall. The lights above flickered slightly, dimming as the janitor shut off the gala's main circuit. Alexander stayed still in the half-dark, the echo of her footsteps fading away until only the hum of the city remained. His phone buzzed another message from the board, another demand for his attention, but he ignored it. He looked down at his reflection on the marble floor, realizing how hollow the image seemed without her standing beside him. Outside, through the tall glass walls, he could see her figure stepping into the rain, no umbrella this time, just walking, free, proud, hurt. He smiled bitterly, a smile that was not really a smile, and whispered to himself, "You are right, Mia. I do not understand your world. I only wish I could have stayed in it a little longer." As the elevator doors closed behind him, the reflection of the hallway lights faded completely, leaving only one man, one mistake, and the echo of a love that had just broken in silence. A month had passed since the night in the hallway, a month of silence, of rain slowly giving way to light. The invitation came in a cream envelope sealed with gold. On the front, printed in elegant serif letters, were the words, "The Art of Mia Lewis, Solo Exhibition." She stared at it for a long time, barely believing it was real. The Carter Foundation, his foundation, was listed at the bottom as the main sponsor. The gallery stood quietly at the edge of downtown, its white walls glowing under soft evening light. People moved gracefully inside, murmuring in admiration, wine glasses in hand. The air smelled faintly of paint and jasmine perfume. Mia stood near the entrance, her hair neatly pinned, wearing a simple black dress. Around her hung fragments of her heart, sketches of city streets, portraits of faces she once knew, and abstract shapes that carried emotions she could not name. But at the center of the gallery, under a single spotlight, stood one painting, the spare seat. 2 figures sat at a small café table. Between them, an empty chair. The brushstrokes were tender yet deliberate, the shadows carrying warmth. It was quiet and full, a silence that said more than words ever could. She turned slightly when the room's murmur softened. He was there. Alexander walked in without the entourage, without the tailored mask of confidence. Just a man in a dark suit, eyes tired but soft. For a moment the crowd seemed to fade. Only the sound of their breaths filled the space. He approached slowly, not with grand speeches or practiced charm, but with something far simpler, In his hand, folded neatly, was a small napkin aged slightly, edges worn. He stopped in front of her, holding it out. "I do not have the right words," he said quietly. "So I brought the only ones that were ever true." She looked down at the napkin. Faint handwriting, slightly smudged, read, "Thank you for sitting down that night. You made me feel human." Her breath caught. A laugh, trembling and wet, escaped her. "You still kept it?" He smiled, not with pride, but with something that looked like humility. Every mistake worth keeping. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not look away. For the first time, the distance between them felt smaller, not erased, but bridged by something honest. Around them, guests pretended not to watch, but the energy in the room shifted softer, warmer. Even the light seemed to settle more gently on them. Mia took the napkin carefully, as though it were made of glass. Her thumb traced the inked words once more. "Do you know," she said quietly, "I almost threw away that table from the café." He smiled faintly. "Then I am glad you did not. Some places deserve to stay, even when the people change." She looked back at the painting, the two figures, the empty chair between them. "It was never really empty," she whispered. He nodded. "No, it never was. Go." The gallery lights dimmed slightly as another song began to play, slow, mellow, familiar. They stood together, surrounded by her art, by silence, by the weight of all the things that had broken and somehow healed. Outside, the rain started again, gentle this time, like applause. And for the first time in a long while, both of them smiled without pain. The gallery had long closed, yet its story continued somewhere quieter. A soft breeze drifted through the open windows of the café, their café. The same wooden table that once divided them now sat under gentle morning light. Paintings from Mia's exhibition hung on the brick wall, filling the space with color and calm. But this time, there was laughter. A small girl, no more than 4 years old, ran around the table with a crown of paper flowers in her hands. Her giggles echoed between the walls as she carefully taped each flower onto the framed copy of the spare seat. Mia watched her with a smile that held both peace and wonder. She leaned on the counter, sketchbook open beside her, a faint ring of coffee around the corner of a page, the same kind of imperfection that once made her anxious, now something she loved. "Careful, sweetheart," she said softly. "Those flowers are supposed to stay on the frame, not on the wall." Quote. The little girl looked up with mischief in her eyes. "But Mama, it looks prettier this way." Before Mia could respond, a familiar voice answered behind her. "She gets that from you." Alexander stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled, holding a small paper bag. Time had softened him, the sharpness in his eyes replaced by a warmth that stayed even when he said nothing. Mia turned toward him, her smile reaching all the way to her eyes. "You are late again." "What?" He set the bag down on the table, kneeling to the little girl's height. "I brought your favorite muffins. Trade you one for that masterpiece?" The girl nodded eagerly, holding up a paper flower. "Only if you help me stick the last one." He laughed, the kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep, unguarded. He lifted her up gently, helping her place the last flower at the top corner of the frame. And there it was, the spare seat, now surrounded by paper blooms and sunlight, no longer lonely. Mia stepped closer, wiping her hands on a towel. Alexander turned toward her, his expression suddenly softer. The air shifted quiet, expectant. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A silver ring, simple but beautiful. He placed it gently on the edge of her sketchbook, right where her pencil once used to rest. "It started with the wrong seat," he said quietly, voice steady but filled with feeling. "But you are the right person." Her breath caught. For a second, the café disappeared. There was only him, her, and the sound of their daughter laughing in the background. Mia looked down at the ring, then back up at him. "You really think so?" He smiled, that same half smile she had first seen years ago. "Every mistake led me here. I would not change a thing. You." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they came with a laugh. "You still talk too much." He chuckled, kneeling fully now, still holding her gaze. "Only when I am afraid you will say no." She shook her head, stepping closer, then stopped talking, and when she bent down, the little girl clapped her hands in delight, not fully understanding, but sensing joy. Outside, the sunlight spilled brighter through the windows, washing the café in a golden glow. On the wall, the painting of the spare seat reflected faintly in the glass, except this time, if you looked closely, there were no empty chairs. "The best mistake we ever made,"